Is it Lampard or Gerrard? I feel like this is the modern generation's version of that. Caicedo or Rice?
What Arsenal will try and do is allow the hunter to go after the ball. Caicedo here is looking for the second press. So Saka can get the better of Cucurella by not doing very much.
After one battered Barcelona and the other bashed Bayern, we turn our attention to the Battle of the Bridge. Chelsea hosts Arsenal in a titanic tussle between the two most informed teams in the country. The Guns have been the gold standard in the Premier League this season, but Maresca's men are hot on their tails, and a win for Chelsea will close the gap at the top to just 3 points. I'm Quaker Fari, subbing in for Will Pugh on this week's Tactical Exposed Team Talk, and I'm joined by the Suns' tactical oracle, Dean Scoggins. Dino, a huge game at Stamford Bridge this weekend, the biggest game of the weekend. In your opinion, is it game, set, match for the title race if Arsenal win this one?
Yeah, it is. Oracle, I like that, Quaker. Thank you very much. No, like that, yeah, it is. It is. If Arsenal win this one, then I think even the most pessimistic Arsenal fans will be thinking they can't lose it from here. But as you say, only 3 points, the gap if Chelsea do win at home. So from a very neutral perspective this week for me, yes, it would be great. It would be great to see the title race opened up again, wouldn't it? And we'll see some more tactical trickery from Arteta and Maresca to do it.
That does lead us to our first question. Who would you pick? Caicedo or Rice? And I feel like every generation, Dino, there's a question, is it Lampard or Gerrard? I feel like this is the modern generation's version of that.
The answer to that is I would not trade either, but I think that's what the Chelsea fans and Arsenal fans would say. The Chelsea fans, like you, come on, they would say, I wouldn't swap Caicedo for anybody. And the Arsenal fans will be saying exactly the same thing about Declan Rice. But from a tactical perspective, like if we go straight into the board, like we know, most people know that the relative setups of the two teams in the sort of 4-3-3 shape, that adapts somewhat, and those people who've watched Tactics Exposed a bit over the last few weeks will have seen us talk about how Chelsea's box midfield isn't what it was. Just as a quick explainer, Enzo Maresca for a long time would go into a position where a fullback, one of the other two, but the fullback would come into here to invert like that and create a box in midfield. Maresca's not done that as often lately. He's preferred a 3 where, you've got Reece James against Barcelona and of course Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez. And clearly Arsenal, the 3 that it's been has been Zubamendi. It was really quite funny actually this week. We saw one of the pundits mispronounce Zubamendi, which I'm very guilty of mispronouncing names, but he called him Supermendy, which I think he should just accept.
Very
That's
apt.
great, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Zubamendi and then obviously Eze and Rice, and they've been really flexible in that. But what's the key to this question tactically is how those two teams can win that battle in there. And what Arsenal, I just want to go back to the Bayern Munich game last night as we're recording on Thursday here and Bayern Munich was Wednesday night, that what Arsenal did at half-time was completely change their setup. Bayern Munich had a lot of possession in the first half, and we've talked a lot about Arteta being quite rigid in his formation, in his setup. And at half-time, he was like, we've been okay, we've been good, but he flicked a switch, and he basically went man for man. And that, to be honest with you, is really bad news for everybody across Europe and the Premier League, that all of a sudden Arsenal have got another way of going about it. Straight after the break, Arsenal went after Bayern. From Neuer goal kicks, from Bayern playing out from the back, they pressed right on the fullbacks, and then they had Saliba from centre-back charging out and pressing right up in the front line. And then in the lead up to Noni Madueke's goal, they did exactly the same with Rice. So that brings me on to that here of what happens with Chelsea. So what Arsenal will try and do is allow the hunter in Declan Rice to go after the ball. So if they try and make Chelsea, by pressing in this particular way, make Chelsea play into these areas here, into these areas of fullbacks. If we come over this side and play in here, and then they'll have Declan Rice, who, look, even if we start him in this position, whether that's Eze or Rice, whichever way they are round, he will get round into here because he knows he's got his mate Zubamendi backing up. And then when the pass comes into here, you've got Rice hunting to try and get the ball in there. So Arsenal will try and block Chelsea into those positions to try and then nick the ball. And often what happens with Arsenal is that the ball will go past Rice when he's pressing, because this player here will lose control of it. But as I then say, Zubimendi comes in and plays the ball right back in there straight away. And then if he plays the ball in there straight away, look, we've got a 4v4 situation here developing. So that's what Arsenal will try and do. And that'll be very, very difficult for Chelsea to combat.
Can I ask, in terms of Arsenal pressing, they'll be encouraged with the fact that, let's give credit to Robert Sanchez, he's had a better season this year. But when he's got the ball at his feet, it's a back step and it kind of invites the opposition on. Is that going to be something that Arsenal target, the fact that Sanchez isn't comfortable with the ball at his feet?
Absolutely will be, and it's right. And if Chelsea get it right, that will also be the benefit for them. Because if Arsenal, let's push them right up. Arsenal do go man v man. They push Eza right back up on here, Saka right on Cucurella, and then they'll push Zubimendi forward and they'll jump a centre-back in to go man v man like that. So if we just freeze that there a second, that is a man v man pressing set up across the whole field. But if you can delay the goalkeeper slightly as an attacking team for Chelsea going this way, and he steps in with the ball, then you're waiting for somebody to come off their marker. So let's say that somebody in midfield does make a mistake in here and ends up trying to press a ball after a bounce pass, then that's the ball in there to get away that way, and then you get your overload going the other way. So risk-reward with Sanchez is probably the right thing. So, but Chelsea have got to be aware of that Declan Rice hunting position. But then we go the other way, and it could be the way that they do it against Arsenal. So if we push Arsenal back into a playing out setup, as they do, keeping their fullbacks wide, dropping a midfielder in, and then getting two midfielders in these positions to receive here, what Chelsea have been really good at is allowing Caicedo to be the spare man. So they'll push Cucurella on, they'll go a three at the back there, like that, and then Caicedo here is looking for the second press. So if these guys press and the ball becomes loose in this area, there he is, hunting the ball. So he's Chelsea's hunter where Rice is the other. If then Arsenal do go back into Raya and back out the other side, they're looking for a striker to really press hard. And again, the ball becomes loose in these areas of the field, and Reece James, but particularly Caicedo, is the hunter to go and get the ball. So I'm going to answer that again after the game on Sunday, but I expect both teams to set up in pressing shapes to allow their star man to go and hunt the ball.
Just quickly, because of the fact that they are both hunters for their teams, is it a case of we won't see them come up against each other too much in this game?
I think that's right, yeah. Both managers will probably be happy if they stay away from each other, because they'll be backing their man to be the match winner, to be the difference maker, if you like. But yeah, I don't think we'll see too many duels between them. I mean, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? You know, it's like when you want two of the best boxers in the world to meet in the ring, and you have to wait years for it. So yeah, let's hope there's a few big meaty challenges in midfield where they go against each other. But look, Chelsea have got physicality in there. You know, they could beef it up with not only Reece James, but they can get Santos in there as well. And we know Enzo Fernandez is tactically very astute. But Arsenal's midfield at the moment looks so good going forward because they're able to free Eza up, because Rice is just he's just like a horse galloping all over the field, isn't he? He's been remarkable. So yeah, licking my lips at watching those two.
Likewise, that's a key battle in this game. Dino firmly sitting on the fence in terms of Caicedo or Rice.
Definitely on the fence.
From the battle in midfield to the battle on the wings, let's go to question number 2. How does Saka finally get the better of his nemesis, Cucurella, who, of course, pocketed Lamine Yamal midweek in the Champions League?
Yeah, very, very good. I mean, Cucurella, one of my favourite players, I've got to be honest, and as much as away fans love to hate him, and I think that's just the compliment that it shows. So one thing I'm just going to show here straight away is that what happened with Cucurella and Saka last time out, I think you and I did the show together in review when we did use that phrase that he completely pocketed Saka, is that Cucurella sort of sent him down dark alleys. So he sent him into places he didn't want to be. Cucurella owned this space here. So he didn't allow Saka to come back inside, beat him in here, and then be 1v1 against this fullback, against this centre-back, which then means you've got a striker running in behind. Cucurella didn't allow him that. He pushed him into this position here and then basically went, you can only go there. And if you can only go there, I'm going to get there to block it. I don't mind if I concede a throw. You don't like conceding corner against Arsenal. But he basically sent him and he pushed him into this area. Of course, he had his mate Caicedo to help him out there. And because Arsenal didn't have somebody supporting Saka as well, last season this is, then that meant Saka found himself in this little position here where even as a player as world-class as Bukayo Saka is, playing against three in there, particularly against one of the best 1v1 defenders in the Premier League, if not the best 1v1 defender in the Premier League, as he showed against Yamal in midweek, then that is going to be very difficult. So, let's try and answer the question. How does he get the better of him? OK, there are two ways. There's two things that Arsenal will be looking at. The first one is not sacrifice Saka. That would be sacrilege to say that, good. Right? OK? That's not what you want to do. But in a game, sometimes a player has to recognise at which point the game isn't coming to him and how he can help other players. And Saka did this brilliantly last week in the North London derby for Arsenal, where he hugged that wing, which meant the fullback inevitably, I've got to mark him, right? It's Bukayo Saka. I've got to mark him. So he goes there. And that meant that it was actually Eza came into this position and Jurriën Timber then saw the opportunity to come up the inside and come through there. So Saka can get the better of Cucurella by not doing very much but being very clever with his movement and almost taking him out of the game. The other way of doing it is that if in that scenario, likely Garnacho here for Chelsea probably, or maybe Neto, depending on how they look at it, they could then say, what we're going to do is drop the winger back in here and then say, Cucurella, just double up, OK? So what Saka and particularly this man, Mikel Merino, have been doing brilliantly in recent weeks is the interchange. So as Arsenal are in build-up play with the ball moving around here, then Merino will be the one who drifts over into this position, making him very difficult to mark because you don't want somebody to go out there, which then means Saka comes into this position here. Now there's a question mark. Who's picking him up? Whose man is he? Get yourself away from Cucurella because you don't want to be with him in a 1v1. Then Merino can play the ball into Saka and Saka will almost be the middleman, the transfer man who can then flick it on to Eza, to Rice bombing on and to whoever Arteta picks on the left-hand side. So it might just be a clever little thing for Saka. Look, if he gets 1v1 against him, run at him, go on, take him on. But in a tactical shape, it might be that Arteta decides, let's isolate Cucurella, keep him away from it, because let's be a little bit honest, and I'm interested on your thoughts about the Chelsea centre-halves, but that's probably the weakness in the Chelsea setup, right?
It is.
Not Cucurella.
It is, and that's what I was going to ask you, because whether Saka hugs the touchline or comes inside, I know everyone wants to talk about the matchup between Cucurella and Saka, but for me, the onus is on the left side, the centre-back, because they're going to have to help out no matter what happens. And like you rightly pointed out, that's probably the weakest part of Chelsea's team. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's where Mikel Merino, I mean, we did the show on Monday. If you've missed that, go back and have a look after the North London derby. I don't want to watch it again. But the Arsenal fans will want to watch it again. But yeah, they can go back and have a look at that because Mikel Merino's movement was the key in freeing up Eza and freeing up Saka. And again, Merino sort of sacrifices himself, to use that phrase again. But in doing that, what he could do is actually move himself onto Cucurella. And then you've got Eza and Saka flying at the two centre-backs, which is not what Chelsea will want to do. So there will be ways that Maresca can adapt that in almost playing narrow this side. And we know that if Pedro Neto plays this side, workhorse, right? So he's the one that would drop almost back as a wing-back. And that way you can shunt that defence around to try and combat this amazing right side of Arsenal.
It's so dangerous. And from a Chelsea fan's point of view, Cucurella is a player that was much maligned when he first came in. Probably our most consistent performer over the last year, 18 months. And that battle was key because we've seen him lock up Lamine Yamal, but Saka's a different prospect and the Premier League is a different kettle of fish to the Champions League. So just seeing how his teammates help him out in that position is probably the key to the game, in my opinion.
Absolutely, yeah. And Saka hasn't scored when Cucurella has been playing for Chelsea. He has had a couple of assists, but yeah, that is a real intriguing battle. Another one to watch.
Another one to watch. Saka is clearly Arsenal's danger man, but Question 3 is asking about Chelsea's danger man. Surely Esteval has to start this one. And like I said, I'm a shameless Chelsea fan, and I was on my
You
sofa.
don't need to be shameless about it. It's fine, you know. Remember who I support at the moment.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring it up. There's a reason why we're not doing Spurs in Tactics Exposed. This is an Esteval that had so much hype and there was so much excitement and buzz, and we saw a glimpse of it at the Club World Cup. He scored against Chelsea. This season maybe hasn't played as much as Chelsea fans would like, but he started midweek against Barcelona, and boy, did he show up. On the same pitch as Lamine Yamal, he came off the pitch as the man that everybody was talking about. Will Enzo Maresca start him in the game on the weekend against Arsenal?
Do you know, my instinct says that no, he won't. But that would be a shame for all of us, because I can't. I just, you know, you mentioned Yamal in midweek, and look, Esteval's best player on the pitch, right? You know, he's the one that gets people out of their seats. He's the reason you go and watch football. He's the style of player that, you know, just makes you excited about the games. And if we're talking about the biggest game of the season so far this Sunday, you know, I think we keep saying that lately, but every time Arsenal do this and then someone gets close to them, it is the biggest game. And if we get to that point, we think, well, you know, you've got to play these players in the big game. But the decision for Maresca probably isn't about Esteval as the right side player. It's how he wants his front three to set up. So if we can safely assume that we're going to see either Reece James or Malo Gusto in an attacking sense in this inside right, because these two obviously interchange quite a lot as two natural right backs. But Reece James, let's assume that it will be Reece James and Caicedo as the two, and Enzo Fernandez in here. There is an argument here that Chelsea could go without a striker. I mean, they were very, very clever in midweek with Neto up there, and that made it a really interchangeable front three where at any point you could have seen Neto or Garnacho in different places, and that allowed Esteval the sort of freedom to roam this area. But there is an argument where you could say, well, let's beef up midfield with an extra man. Maybe Santos, would be Lavia if he was fit, and then not play a striker and have Enzo Fernandez as sort of the release midfielder who goes, and then you play with two wingers, including Esteval, who you just sort of leave up and say, if we're going to counter-attack Arsenal, let's try and get them in a position where Arsenal get into their 3-2-5 shape, like that. And then by playing two wingers up the field, you cause them a problem where you say, do you leave them up or back? That's risky, because you've got sort of two players you're saying aren't in the game all the time, but can really hurt a team going the other way. But it's a home game for Chelsea. Do you play without a striker?
Is that talk about that in terms of the difference of it being an away game to it being a game at Stamford Bridge, where the crowd will get a little bit antsy if Chelsea don't show some attacking impetus.
We saw it even in the Arsenal game, where the Bayern Munich crowd are one of the best away supports in the world. They're absolutely amazing, and you know, they were all up and, you know, always are. But Arsenal then just got corner after corner after corner, and they put the pressure on, and even that Bayern away crowd gets a bit twitchy. So if you transfer that into Stamford Bridge and you get into a position where Arsenal are putting pressure on, and you haven't got an out ball, and you've set up without a striker, the fans feel a little bit like, oh, well, what? Oh, we're just rolling over here against Arsenal. That's not the case. It's a tactic, but it can be interpreted that way. So the question is then, do they go, you know, with the flying forwards without a striker, or is it Delap or João Pedro? Now, there's two ways of looking at that. Is that Saliba, who will be the right centre-back for Arsenal, barring any late injuries, is, I would say, Arsenal's only weakness at the moment is Saliba under the high ball. And I've always thought this about Saliba: Rolls Royce on the deck, but if it's bouncing or it goes over his head, that's where he doesn't like it. That's not a massive criticism of him, because he's so elite that even at that, he's pretty good. But that's where, if you have a Delap running into that channel there, and you say to Reece James or Gusto that we want that ball hit into this area here, and you give Saliba a problem turning and going the other way. That's the benefit of Delap. The benefit of João Pedro is that then he comes into here, which again frees Enzo Fernandez to go and join the attack. And we saw in the Tottenham game, when Chelsea played Spurs, that João Pedro becoming the extra man in this sort of open space in between midfield and attack was the real danger, to release those wingers. I'm conscious that the question was about Esteval, and I've not really mentioned him. I think that if it was an away game, then setting up with Esteval like that might be the way. I actually think that if Chelsea can be solid, have a workhorse in a more experienced Pedro Neto in here, and then hopefully stay in the game as long as possible, and then release Esteval 65, 70 minutes is probably the way to go.
Well, we live in a world of starters and finishers, and it was Mikel Arteta who actually brought up that notion in the Champions League game. And that might be Esteval's role in this game and in this Chelsea team this season. Maybe he's Chelsea's finisher as opposed to a starter.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, look, we saw his amazing performance against Barcelona, but we look back at previous Premier League and European games, and he has come on and been the difference maker. So yeah, I mean, win-win, right? Yeah. You have a player who starts like him, fantastic. You're not quite going right, you can bring him off the bench.
Well, with Maresca's fondness for tinkering, punters need not worry because Betfair have got you covered. With Betfair's safe sub, your bet isn't over yet if the player you backed gets subbed off, because your bet simply rolls over to the player who's coming on. So, for example, if you back Esteval to score a goal against Arsenal, he draws a blank and he's replaced by Pedro Neto, your bet will still win if Neto scores a goal. Dino, predictions.
Oh, you know I don't like
I know you don't like predictions, but we've got to do it.
On the back of a win in the North London derby and beating Bayern Munich in the week, I think Arsenal will be relatively happy with a draw. I think a high-scoring 2-2 draw will be great for the neutral right for me. But yeah, Chelsea are a good side at home. I think the head probably says Arsenal will edge it, but maybe the Stamford Bridge factor comes in for a 2-2 draw.
I'll take a draw right now as a Chelsea fan. Make sure you log back into the Sun Sports YouTube channel for Tactics Exposed for a review of the biggest game of the weekend.